Bachman's Basement is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Welcome back to Bachman's Basement, where the stories that lurk in the shadows are brought to light. I'm your host, Chris Clawson, and I'm here with my co-host, Chris Patton. And today, we're unearthing the dark delights of Needful Things. This one's a hell of a story, folks. A whole town driven mad by their deepest desires. Let's see what horrors lie within, shall we? But before we do that, let's just talk a little bit about our week. How you been, Chris?
I've been okay, man. Kind of getting over a little bit of a cold and dealing with that. But outside of that, I watched a lot of Law and Order. And by Law and Order, I don't mean like Law and Order SVU or Law and Order Criminal Intent. I mean original, let's start back at 1990, Law and Order with Christopher Noth and his group of people. And I want to say like the 90s version hits a little harder, man. When was the last time you watched an early episode of Law and Order?
It's been a while. So that probably at least 15 years.
So with me, when I was sick, I was like, what is something I can put on and not care about while high on all of these drugs? Various drugs, and Law and Order was one of the first things that came to mind. And there happens to be with all of these various TV apps, Pluto, etc., or live TV through Roku, there's always a channel, right, that has stuff like this, whether it's Walker Texas Ranger or Law and Order or the Commish even.
Right, so, just comfort television.
I landed on Law and Order, and it started at like season 7 or something, and then it went through a couple of seasons through that time period. And then what happens with those is that they only have rights to certain seasons. So you hit, and I was like, I'll start Law and Order back from the very beginning. And going back to the 90s, man, the original seasons of Law and Order, let me tell you, there's something special about those original seasons of Law and Order. So lots of Law and Order with Christopher Noth as the one of the lead detectives, and entertaining stuff, to say the least, and tackling some kind of big issues that you wouldn't think that they would be tackling in 1990, both politically, with religion, or with gay rights or abortion, like a bunch of stuff that like they kind of skate around even nowadays on some of these Law and Order shows. But right. Yeah, all there. And then outside of that, I was playing Pokemon, been playing Pokemon ZA for quite a while. I think that I'm getting close to wrapping that up, maybe. But once again, it's one of those games that I don't think really has an ending. And then lots of like old school Game Boy Advance games that I've been kind of going back and revisiting. And once again, lots of Pokemon. Pokemon ROM hacks specifically. But yeah, outside of that, man, just getting over that cold, getting us back on track here, catching up with books, and yeah, my wife has been listening to some doozies that I'm going to talk about on the Patton Report that I've been hearing through osmosis on Audible. Some more just weird coming of age, more modern stories, some stuff that I would normally never listen to. So that's going to be fun if for those who listen to the Patton Report. I can't think of any names right now, and I don't have any of my notes in front of me. But there was one where you ever saw or heard of Outlander?
I think so.
Okay, so there's this idea of like you kind of like time travel between periods, but so basically the female character in Outlander, she ends up with two different lives, like one in modern times and one in like the 1700s or 1700 Ireland, or I believe it's the 1700s. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I watched Outlander, but this book is kind of very similar, but it's like she has this lover in the future, and then she goes back to the time, and has this whole family named Eamon, and just the way it's written is so cringeworthy. Like it sounds like someone just ran an idea through Chat GPT and then fixed like just little bitty things instead of like rewriting a book. And it is just so on the nose of like Outlander kind of idea. I will have to get the name. It'll be on the pad report where I will have more detailed notes. But that was definitely one of those things where because I was sleeping through various stages of sickness, and she was being nice and trying not to wake me up, she would be listening to these audibles, and I would wake up out of like a drowsy NyQuil state and hear some of this stuff, and then she would be talking about how bad the book that she was listening to was or whatever. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I listened to part of that. It was awful. We were able to have those conversations, which was really fun. But yeah, man, what have you been up to? How's the family doing? What have you been watching? What have you been reading, listening to, etc.?
Family's been good. My son had an orchestra concert, and that went really well. The Halloween sort of concert, super fun, and family and friends came, and that was a good time. Then been picking up the guitar a bit more lately and trying to get back to the sort of just the rudiments, trying to get faster and learning sweep picking and things like that. So that's been a fun new challenge that I've been undertaking.
Yeah, it's always fun diving back in when you've taken a break from guitar for a while and just getting back in what I call guitar playing shape.
Right.
There's also show playing shape, which is a different thing in itself. But yeah,
very true. Yeah, it's something obviously, as we've talked about for years at this point. It's something that I've been passionate about, but in the past much more passionate about, and now I'm starting to have a little more time. Kids are getting a little bit older, so now I'm like, I should really devote myself back to that a little more. So
yeah, I always with guitar I go through a love-hate relationship at times, especially because I spend a lot of my time trying to write songs, and it becomes its own weird, unique thing, right? But there is something great about the day, like when you wake up and you're like, oh, man, I got nothing going. And you can sit down and just run some scales like you're talking about and just get like a good guitar workout in. I feel like that's how when other people talk about like going for a run and stuff, like how they feel. For me, it's that like being able to just set a metronome and sit in a room and run scales for a while.
Well, it's fun. I think, there's so many different ways you can practice the guitar depending on what you want to accomplish. And early on, when I first started learning the instrument, playing the lead guitar was my thing. And then slowly and surely I just kind of got away from that, became a rhythm guitar player and a singer. And then now I'm just like, man, I miss just playing the lead guitar, and I'm way more into metal music these days. And so I'm like, I never learned to play that style of music. So that's been sort of my goal is I want to learn how to play, ripping fast guitar solos.
Yeah, with the recent passing of Ace Frehley, I've went and revisited a bunch of Ace Frehley guitar licks and stuff, and that's been, as far as like things I've been doing is guitar wise or music wise, a lot of just trying to write. Not necessarily. I'm the kind of guy that kind of writes bits and pieces of songs until something really strikes me. And then I'll have like a really good idea, and it'll all flood out at one time instead of trying to force myself to write. I used to try to force myself to write a song like at least once a week of various degrees and quality. But I think, for me, at least my process goes, I just try to get like 2 or 3 good lines now when I sit down, and then continue the next time I pick it up when it comes to like songwriting. But yeah, as far as like recent things I've been playing, you brought up metal, and Kiss doesn't necessarily fall in the context of metal or today's metal at the very least. But I start thinking about like Dimebag Darrell and all the people he's influenced. So I when you brought that up, I was like, oh yeah, I did do that after Ace recently passed away, which rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
The old Space Ace. So I did sit down and play a bunch of like stuff like Cold Gin and Black Diamond, and just fun Ace Frehley guitar licks, which is probably like the thing I spent the most time out of.
I've always wanted to learn Detroit Rock City. I mean, it's probably a pretty easy song, but that one always
depends on how you want to play it.
Right.
I like with anything with guitar, like when people are like, "Oh, that's easy," you hear it, and you're like, "Oh, that's easy." They'll say like guitar, like Detroit Rock City. There's lots of octave guitar parts and stuff, and like, how do you want to adapt that to just you playing it? Right? Like you could do some neat stuff with effects pedals and you could take that thing and run with it. You could also change the tempo and speed, and there's no such thing as should be pretty easy, right? And then also, it depends on how far you go down the road of getting the tone right.
True. Yeah. That
making it sound as close to the album, which is what I've done that for a long time, and that's well, you heard me send you like 20 different versions of Alive that one summer.
Right.
Like Pearl Jam. It depends on how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole.
Do I take the blue pill or do I take the red pill?
Exactly.
Well, I guess we get back to what we're here to do, but we're here to talk about Needful Things. Needful Things is a story set in the fictional town of Castle Rock, Maine, and it's all about a new store that pops up suddenly, selling people exactly what they've always wanted. Sounds great, right? Well, in this case, not so much. The owner, Leland Gaunt, has a knack for knowing just what these people crave, be it a baseball card, some carnival glass, or even a special amulet that relieves pain. He uses these things to stir up trouble, pitting folks against one another. Pretty soon the whole town's wrapped up in this twisted game of revenge and desire. And let me tell you, in classic Stephen King fashion, things get real dark real fast. It's got a large cast of characters that feel like they could be your next door neighbors, from Sheriff Pangborn to the head selectman Danforth Keaton to the young boy that rides his bike around town, Brian Rusk. The story sets out to build incredibly well-developed characters whose motivations can seem arbitrary when you first start to hear about them, but as the story unfolds, all of these moving pieces start to come together and bang up against one another in unexpected and at times incredibly shocking ways. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head so far. This is definitely one of those Stephen King novels that is very much the ensemble of the cast, meaning more than one particular character, probably with the exception of the store owner himself, as Leland is the guy that wraps all of these terrible, tragic things together by feeding off of humanity's own wanting consumer, being consumer, right? Consumer of things, of collecting, and I'm guilty of all of those things. But yeah, I mean, I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head so far as giving a synopsis of what this is. It also has some feel of like, was it Storm of the Century?
Yeah, I can see that.
Which is probably why I dig this book so much, honestly, because I love Storm of the Century. It goes into obviously similar characters as far as Leland Gaunt, but the approach is different, right? So,
I mean, he's done this quite a few times. Storm of the Century. I mean, you could even argue The Mist. You know, there's this
right
in The Mist. It's more just a group of people in a store, or even in one of his magnum opuses, Under the Dome. You know, something similar happening there as well. So
where you have the idea of all these characters and their build and who they are and what they're needful for, and then how that starts them down this dark rabbit hole in this small town. But yeah, I think you kind of nailed it.
Yeah, and I think being that there are so many moving parts to this story, that breaking down every exact plot point and all the details may end up just taking us an incredible amount of time and probably boring you guys in the process. Plus, this particular story is one I feel that you can't fully appreciate unless you've read it yourself. So if the length of the novel is a detractor for you, consider listening to the Audible version. It's read by Stephen King himself, and it's excellent. Also, just a quick note with regards to this story. If you look at the cover of this novel, it is billed as the last Castle Rock story, which, if you've been a constant reader of Stephen King's, you will find that he has returned to this town in some of his more recent stories. So at the time, in 1991, when he released it, this was his sort of end for Castle Rock. King, he's created a lot of famous fictional towns throughout his career, from Derry to Jerusalem's Lot, Haven, Ludlow, and Chester's Mill, just to name a few. But aside from Derry, I'd say Castle Rock is probably his most prolific setting, with novels like Cujo, The Dark Half, The Dead Zone, Bag of Bones, as well as a few short stories like The Body, i.e. Stand By Me, and Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption are all being set in Castle Rock. I say all of that just to say Needful Things does feel kind of like an end of an era in King's writing, or maybe you could look at it like the beginning of a new era. And as I mentioned in our previous episode, this is definitely a top 10 novel for me.
Yeah, so for me, I don't know that this one really stuck with me reading it the first time. And I, in as far as like the Castle Rock series, I don't know that it would crack my list of top 3, but I do have an appreciation for it. The part that kind of falls flat to me will be more when we get towards the end of this book. I think there's a lot of good things in the in between. And this is not me just doing what everyone does, which is like, oh, Stephen King has a problem with the ending. It is more about the end battle in this particular novel and how that plays out.
Yeah, I'll be interested to hear your take on it. I guess jumping into sort of some of the themes of this novel, obviously this novel digs into how easily people can get carried away with their desires, like gossiping, gambling, drinking, sex, even when they know it's not good for them. It touches on how quickly a community can fall apart when everyone's just looking out for themselves instead of sticking together. I feel like these themes, if you read the book, feel fresh. They feel as urgent today as they did in 1991 when he published it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think that's one of those things where some of these themes are just timeless, right? The idea of being selfish in being the hero of your own story to some extent. Taking precedence over the entirety of a community, not on purpose. It's not that humans do that on purpose. I think there's just there's an inherent thing of your. They actually have a song where there's a line that says, "I am my biggest fan," and I think there's something inherently true about that, whether you want it to be or not. And how you break away from that is kind of is its own problem. It's the own thing that I think everyone deals with, right? Like whether you're,
it's like that old adage, the things you own end up owning you. It almost feels like that's like a central theme that King was thinking about, or maybe was even an inspiration for this story.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, just an important note, if you haven't read this story, each of the characters end up just fascinated as this shop opens up, and it's right downtown. It's got this really cool green overhang, so it's kind of like classic Americana, and it's just appealing to people. It's a new store in town, so people just start to come into the store, and when they do, the character of Leland Gaunt, who really is the devil, I mean, just come right out and say it. He is the devil. He kind of puts them into a trance where they're more pliable to his whims. And then, like, for example, with Brian Rusk, who he finds this baseball card for him that's like a very specific baseball card. And Brian just wants to make sure that he can keep that baseball card without his parents finding out how little amount of money he spent to get it. Or another character, this character of Hugh Priest, who's like a local sort of burnout alcoholic, making the deal with the devil to get his hands on this foxtail, like an item that he had when he was young that he had tied to the radio antenna on his car. And it just kind of like when he sees that in the store, like it takes him back to a time before he was, a burnout alcoholic, when his whole life was still ahead of him. And he feels like if he can just have that thing, that he would have the strength, at least in his own mind, to change his life for the better. And I think each of these characters find something that they need that they're willing to pay, not just money, but also whatever they're being asked to pay. In this case, it's I guess a small favor that's owed to Leland Gaunt, the shopkeeper. What start as seemingly harmless pranks escalate into real damage. And the funny thing is, I think that Gaunt already knows everyone's rivalries and resentments between all of these townspeople and how all of these people kind of connect to each other, and the way that he can use these favors to kind of ignite these the worst of humanity between everybody and make it look like it's different people getting revenge on their would-be rivals. And that is kind of the long and the short of the story, really.
Yeah, and that plays very much into what I was saying as far as the comparison to Storm of the Century goes. It's a little different, but he knows everyone's dark secrets, right? And exposing those to other people starts this townhood rivalry. But the crazy thing, the way this starts out with going back to Brian Rust's character, is he's definitely the first he's the first customer of the store, and he's the catalyst of the entire town's unraveling, right? In this weird way. I mean, he walks in and he's just a kid obsessed with baseball cards, and he wants a rare Sandy Koufax card. And I mean, if you're a card collector, which I related to this as someone who collected cards growing up and still do collect hockey cards. If anybody's got any hockey cards they want to send me, make sure you hit me on Instagram after this. But he gets them for a few dollars in a prank. And there's something about, and Stephen King, I think, is always really good about this with his child characters, is the childlike innocence mixed with the obsession of the card collecting. And his prank leads to a tragedy that sets off this domino effect in Castle Rock. And I know we're not going to go talk about every character, but him being point A of this, I just wanted to kind of dive into a little bit more detail. And to go back a little bit of what you were saying with some of the theme, and something I had in my notes as you were talking, I wanted to hit on, which was just kind of the price of desire, right? Like at the heart of this book is a story about what people are willing to trade for what they want most, and every character believing they're getting a harmless deal, whether it's a rare item, a little comfort, or a taste of something that they think is missing from their life. But like each payment as we go through this brings on destruction, right? Like it's something that seems harmless, but it's really, really not.
Right. I mean, it's just the classic deal with the devil. And it's like, are you selling your soul, sort of thing that these people are aware to some degree, that they still have free will, but they're choosing, they want that thing so bad, they don't want to lose it. And I mean, the motivations of each of these people are made, crystal clear in the story when they're like, I shouldn't do that. But if I don't do that, then I have to give the thing back. and I really want the thing. So
and I mean, I think that's the thing that it's the devil in small town America. Of course, that's what they're going for. But he's not doing anything inherently evil. He's exposing what's already there. These rivalries that already exist, these old grudges, the jealousy, hypocrisy of various characters throughout the story, and their greed.
Yeah, I mean,
it's all stuff that's already simmering below the surface. He's just giving it a little nudge.
Exactly. It's there's already gasoline on this town, and he's just handing somebody a lit match. They're doing all the dirty work. He's just there as a catalyst. I guess the idea of needing something that isn't really a need is certainly relatable. I think most people, yourself and myself included, have had that experience of just wanting something and desperately thinking, if I can just get that thing, then my life will somehow be more fulfilled or complete. And I know, having that feeling and then thinking about the outcome of that situation, getting that thing that I really wanted, and the feeling, it's usually short-lived enjoyment before you realize that didn't fulfill me at all. So like in the context of this novel, all these items that the characters get from the shop, they bring an almost drug-like high for the characters, which, in the short term gives them immense satisfaction. And unfortunately for them, the cost of having the things ends up bringing destruction to them and everyone around them. But I hadn't really thought about it until I was putting this episode together. But the novel was the first novel that Stephen King wrote after going to rehab. So I think the last novel he wrote while he was still addicted to cocaine and alcohol was The Tommyknockers. And then, this is the first one after getting clean. And I've never heard him in interviews speak about this novel being a direct analogy for drug addiction, but I feel like the subtext is there if you're thinking about it in that way.
Yeah, I guess the idea of chasing the high, right? Chasing the thing that's going to make you happy.
Right. It's like
whether that's being a consumerism or doing drugs or getting your next fix. Like there's something inherent that's like the same to some extent of that, right? Like especially if you look at the first kid, the kind of the catalyst, the opening of the story. Being a collector, you always want the next thing.
Absolutely.
So you got your Sandy Koufax, but like, where's your Mantle at now, right? Like, where's your Mickey Mantle? Where's your Babe Ruth?
Right.
It's always a chase, and to some extent, you're with that particular instance, and I think that's a prime example is you're chasing the next high.
It's very true. So yeah, obviously, this novel isn't the only Stephen King novel that has themes of addiction and recovery. I would say that is certainly a central through line in so much of his work, being that his life is one of a recovering addict in real life, and often his characters are in various stages of addiction or recovery. I guess, you write what you know. So he does that tremendously well, and we wouldn't be having this podcast if we weren't fans.
Yeah, and one thing that I had in my theme that I don't think that you hit on was just how fragile a community can be, right? Like, so this is supposed to be this super close-knit small town where everyone knows everyone, and you always hear like murder. We've never had murders in this town. It's always the person at the beginning of like a serial killer story or something. Like, it's unbelievable that this would happen here, but it points to being like how fragile communities can actually be. It's everyone knows everyone. Everybody acts like they love everyone, but it takes very little for that to crumble, right? And Gaunt manipulating through gossip, grudges, and mistrust to turn neighbor against neighbor. It doesn't take a whole lot. It's not that big of a push, and it kind of points to not knowing your neighbor as well as you think you do, not knowing your friends as well as you think you do, not like having this built up anger and hatred for certain people that you probably should have let go a long time ago. I mean, it is kind of the a story about how human interaction at some point as well, like not taking care of some of these issues that would be a lot would the book could end a lot differently if people would just talk to each other and be more honest, to some extent.
Communication is either the easiest or the hardest thing that we do as humans, and unfortunately for these characters, they're working on rumors and assumptions. So it ends up just like a domino effect, like you said. It's just one bad thing happens with Brian Rusk's little prank of throwing mud on some laundry, and I'm trying to think, is it Nettie? No, it's not Nettie, it's Wilma. It's Wilma Jerzik's backyard that he dirties up her laundry with some mud. But Wilma and Nettie have this rivalry between each other, their neighbors. And so Wilma thinks that it's Nettie that did this to her because they hate each other. And so that, just one thing leads to another, and down go the dominoes.
Yeah, I mean, that's very much just it's the old story, the old adage of two families hating one another for reasons that they can't even remember at some point, right?
Right.
Or
exactly.
to take it to the comedy standpoint. You ever seen that movie Grumpy Old Men?
Absolutely.
That's these two characters, and kind of the way they're written and what their anger is about is very much grumpy old men. Like it's just a bunch of little small things, right?
Exactly.
It just took that little push.
Yeah, Wilma being intolerant of Nettie's dog barking all the time, and so Wilma thinks that Nettie's getting back at her for being pissed at that all the time and calling the cops on her. And then of course, the character that I mentioned before, Hugh Priest, when he gets his foxtail, goes on. His little prank is a much darker. It's not a prank. He ends up killing Nettie's dog horribly, which if you've seen the movie Needful Things, is it's not. I don't feel like the movie's that great. Personally, I would read the book, but there certainly is a movie with Ed Harris as Sheriff Pangborn that you can check out if you're not gonna sit down and read the book, because it's certainly an undertaking to read this one. But yeah, the dog getting murdered is one of those things that stands out. Stephen King likes to kill kids and animals to great effect. That certainly does affect you as the reader to see that happen.
It does, but at the same time, it's kind of the cheap thing to do in a lot of sense. It's not one of my favorite things he does. Same thing with all of the horror movies that have latched on to that idea with like, we'll just kill an animal in the first 10 minutes and that'll be the big shock for everybody.
Pull at your heartstrings. But I mean, yeah, he said that himself. He's like, I'm going to start by, trying to actually scare you. But if I can't do that, then I'm going to do something grotesque, to pull at your heartstrings. So certainly there's a bit of everything in this story in that way. That is one that stands out, and it's just one of the dominoes. It's like the next thing that happens after that kind of gets them attacking each other. But
I know we're kind of there is one character I kind of wanted to talk about in a little more detail, which was Danforth, Buster Keaton.
Right.
Yeah. His role is basically being a corrupt politician to some extent, and one of Gaunt's most manipulated of all the characters that we encounter in this book. But he's essentially a compulsive gambler. He's deep in debt. He's paranoid. His mental state's unraveling. And Gaunt is just feeding him delusions and giving him a magic that promises to fix his life, which I think is very interesting for a character trait, but it is also like symbolism for, political corruption, greed, and this fake illusion of power. But like at the same time, it's showing that Gaunt himself doesn't create evil. He's only amplifying what's already there.
Exactly. Which
is a
the
huge
devil.
theme.
The devil doesn't do the evil. He just presents it to you and goes, do you want the easy way? And most people do choose that. I mean, what is it? The thing that he gets him is it's like a little horse race toy where they're little mechanical horses that move around the track, and it tells Danforth what horse is going to come in first. So then he goes, understanding that this thing is going to work, to tell him what horse will come in first. And then he goes to the horse racing track and bets on it and starts winning. Yeah. And that, takes these little trivial things and turns them into, just a way to control people.
Right.
Yeah. So that, I'd say for me, the toughest or most heartbreaking needful thing, if you will, would be the amulet that Polly Chalmers gets that brings her relief from her crippling arthritis. So watching her have that relief, all of her joints stop hurting, having that relief from pain, and then Gaunt uses the fear of losing that relief as a means to keep her under his control and to do her bidding. So again, just an analogy of addiction in my mind, or just, a fear of loss.
Yeah, that one is probably the saddest of all of these as far as what's being given, right? And what is also being like, well, I can take it away at any time. Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. Polly Chalmers. Oh yeah, that one's a little tough. That's a tough part to get through.
Right. And then to use that, obviously Sheriff Pangborn, and again, we're just jumping around here and picking and choosing. There's so much that's going on in this story that I know that we're not touching on everything, but obviously Sheriff Pangborn, this character you learn early on, had lost his wife and one of his sons in a horrible car accident, and that he's in the grieving process, but it's been a couple years, and he has this new sort of relationship with Polly, and so it's like he's looking out for her. He's sort of, as the sheriff in town, is kind of a little more skeptical of what's going on with this new shop, and so he's not really going in there. He's a little too busy to go in there, and so like when it gets to towards the end of the story and the way that Gaunt uses Polly to deliver that videotape that kind of shows him what happened with his wife and son, like that's also incredibly disturbing. And it's
incredibly disturbing. It's also one of the ones that shows Gaunt's kind of true evil, as opposed to just turning people against one another, is because Pangborn, his entire thing, it's almost the temptation versus integrity, because Pangborn's the one trying to hold this town together the entire time.
Exactly.
Which makes him a very interesting character. Like his entire motivation throughout the book is to protect the town, maintain order, as it spirals into this shit show, for lack of a better term. And he's also searching for personal redemption and meaning after loss, after losing his wife and son, as you noted, and that actually is seen in the dark half. So something that we will get to in the future. But he's an interesting character, and kind of the only person in this book that is redeemable to some extent.
Yeah, I guess you'd say that. Yeah, being that he never succumbs to his desires, in the sense of, he doesn't participate in this, whatever you want to call this sick game that Gaunt has brought to town.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess also just another quick thought that I had, as I just remembered an interview with Stephen King where he had said that there's, a million ways to dress up a hot dog, as an answer to how he keeps coming up with new story ideas. And it seemed fitting for this story, as, it's sort of a tale as old as the human condition. a novel that comes to mind immediately when I'm thinking of a comparison to Needful Things is Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes, where the basic bones of both of these stories are the same. You have a mysterious man that comes to town and offers the townsfolk a chance to fulfill their deepest desires. They're dressed up in different ways, but the dressing makes all the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I get his meaning there for sure. Like, it's how I like that. It's how you dress up a hot dog, whether you're putting, sauerkraut on it or going Chicago style or going Coney style.
Yeah.
I get it.
It
I get what
becomes
he
something new when you change some of the parts. Yeah, it makes it into something different. So yeah, that you could say that Stephen King takes the mundane and dresses it up in a new way and creates something new and interesting.
So at the beginning of this, I noted that I don't know that this the reread moved me hard enough to think that this is one of my favorite Castle Rock books. And I kind of, you asked if I would get into it later, and I'm going to here. And this may offend some people. We'll see how this goes. But so one thing about it is there is a clear tone shift from the first 2/3 of the novel, of it being like a slow burn psychological horror, to a very big explosive ending with gunfights and near apocalyptic destruction in this very small town. And I think it clashed with the tone of the rest of the novel and what made it kind of eerie and intimate as far as learning so much about these characters. And then the other thing is just that there's so many characters, there's not closure. I don't feel like there's any true sense of closure. And then, not to spoil anything for those who haven't read this, but Alan's magic trick solution just didn't really work for me. And the last confrontation between Pangborn and Gaunt, it kind of hinges on a literal magic trick.
Fair. I get your point there, and everything that you're saying. It's a novel that is strong for what it sets out to do, and then maybe again for you definitely doesn't stick the landing in the end. And again, that comes back to so many people saying Stephen King doesn't know how to wrap his books up, but it's enjoyable. I think if you happen to be listening and you haven't happened to read this book, it is a great jumping on point as a Stephen King fan. It's a story that's going to draw you in, much the same as Mr. Gaunt does with the patrons of his shop. The difference for me is that you won't regret your decision. That's my take on it. Sounds like you have a little different take versus the way that things sort of shake out in the end.
I think it's something that if you're a Stephen King fan, you should definitely read. And I think it's very well written. And like I said, I think for 2/3 of the book, it's phenomenal. Just to me, too little closure. And without spoiling it, without me going too spoiler, Gaunt got off too easy. Right.
Fair.
There's to some extent, and I know this isn't how the world works, but there is the sense of wanting to eventually see good overcome evil. And I don't know that you clearly get that here. And it also marks the end of an era, right? This is the end of all of the Castle Rock for quite some time. That's the total destruction set forth by Gaunt. So it's just something to keep in mind. I don't think it's a bad novel at all. I can see why a lot of people, it's one of their favorites. I think there's different ways to look at that ending and the ending of an era for Stephen King. But, if I'm just thinking about it objectively, and the other there's other Stephen King novels where people hate the endings, and I'm just like, I don't get it. Like, I thought it was fine. But this one, kind of to some extent rubbed me the wrong way, but it was still a great read and definitely something I would recommend. I wouldn't say that my opinion on it should steer you from listening to it or reading it, because I think that you could walk away with something completely different.
Yeah, I mean it really comes back to it's the idea is of the story isn't a new one, but it is an interesting take on, the classic, hey, I got a plot of land to sell you down by the river, sort of thing. So, just people being duped based on their own, greed and desire. But yeah, I guess that kind of wraps things up. So thanks again for spending some time with us here in Bachman's basement. And remember, the most sinister things often hide in the most ordinary places. So until next time, stay vigilant and don't let the monsters in.
Mm-hmm.